There's no place for you here. That's what my son and his wife said to me on Christmas. So I left. And what happened the next day? Well, that's the story I need to tell. It all started with so much hope. My name is Maxine Haynes, and I'm 68 years old. My husband, Frank, passed away 3 years ago, and the holidays have been quiet ever since. This year, though, this Christmas was going to be different. My son, Dennis, had called me 2 weeks prior. Mom, we want you to come down to Palm Beach for Christmas dinner. He'd said, Palm Beach. It sounded so grand. Dennis and his wife, Lisa, had moved there a few years ago for his job. He was doing very well, and their house, from the pictures I'd seen, looked like something out of a magazine. I hadn't seen them in nearly a year, and my heart just leapt at the invitation. That morning, I woke up before the sun. Christmas. I'd spent the entire day before baking. My signature apple pie, the one with the lattice crust and a little extra cinnamon, just how Dennis always liked it, was sitting on the counter, cooling. I wrapped it carefully in foil, making sure it wouldn't slide around in the box. I'd even ironed my best red blouse, the one with the nice collar. I checked my hair in the mirror, patting down a few gray flyaways. I wanted to look nice. I was so excited I could barely drink my coffee. I kept picturing Dennis's face when he saw the pie. I imagined us all sitting around a beautiful table, laughing, the Christmas tree lights twinkling. Maybe Lisa and I would finally connect. That's where the little knot in my stomach started. If I'm being honest, I've always felt a little unsteady around Lisa. She's not unkind, not exactly, but she's particular. Everything in her life is perfect, from her white carpets to her polished fingernails. And when I'm around her, I always feel like I'm about to spill something, like I'm being graded. When they got married 5 years ago, I'd hoped she'd feel like the daughter I never had. But that warmth just never came. There was always a distance, a polite wall I couldn't seem to get past. I shook the feeling off. Stop it, Maxine. I told myself out loud. It's Christmas. Family is family. The drive wasn't too long, and I spent it humming along to carols on the radio, the smell of cinnamon and apples from the pie filling my car. I was so full of hope. I was going to see my son. We were going to have a wonderful, proper family Christmas. I pulled into their neighborhood, and the houses got bigger, the lawns greener. When I finally parked in their curved driveway, I just sat there for a second. I took a deep breath, picked up the pie, and rang the doorbell, a big smile already on my face, ready for the hug I was sure I was about to get. The door opened. It was Lisa. She just stood there, wearing a cream-colored silk dress that probably cost more than my entire grocery budget for a month. Her smile, it didn't reach her eyes. It was tight, like a rubber band stretched too far. Maxine, you're here. Not Mom. Not Maxine, come on in. Just, you're here. My own smile faltered a bit, but I kept it in place. Hello, Lisa. Merry Christmas. I brought the apple pie, Dennis's favorite. I held it out, the box feeling suddenly heavy. She just glanced at it. Oh, great. Just you can put it on the counter. She stepped aside, but not all the way. I had to squeeze past her, my coat brushing the wall of the pristine entryway. The house was stunning. It was all white marble and glass. A giant Christmas tree stood in the living room, professionally decorated, with not a single ornament out of place. From down the hall, I could hear laughter, music, and the clinking of glasses. It sounded like a real party. It sounds lovely, I said, trying to get my cheerful feeling back. Where's Dennis? I can't wait to see him. Lisa didn't move. She smoothed the front of her perfect dress. He's with our guests. It's a bit of a work thing, actually. A lot of his partners are here. This was new. I thought it was a family dinner. Oh, I said, well, I'd love to just say a quick hello. I started to move toward the sound of the party, but she put a hand out. Not on my arm, just up, like a polite traffic cop. "Actually, Maxine," she said, and her voice dropped to that fake sweet tone. "The one that means you're not going to like what comes next. We're just so tight on space tonight. The dining room is completely full. I hope you don't mind, but I set up a little spot for you in the kitchen." She smiled again, that same tight smile. "It's just, well, you understand. We had more RSVPs than we expected." I just stared at her, tight on space. In this huge house, I wanted to look past her down the hall, to see this full dining room for myself. But I didn't. I just nodded. What else was I supposed to do? Make a scene at the front door? "Oh, of course. Whatever is easiest," I said. My voice sounded small, even to me. "Great. It's just right through here." She didn't lead me to the party. She led me away from the laughter, through a swinging door, and into the kitchen. The kitchen itself was enormous. It looked like something out of a magazine, all stainless steel and darkwood, with a huge marble island in the middle. But she walked me right past all of it to the far corner, the corner by the pantry door and the recycling bins. And that's where I saw it. It was a small metal folding table, the kind you pull out of the garage for puzzles or a card game. It didn't even have a tablecloth, just the bare, off-white top. And on the table, my breath just caught in my throat. It was one single place setting. It was a paper plate, a thick one, the sturdy kind, but still paper. Next to it was a white plastic fork, a plastic knife, and a single paper napkin. A folding metal chair was tucked underneath. I just froze. A paper plate. I looked at the gleaming marble counters, the 6-burner gas stove, the built-in wine fridge. I could still hear the clinking of what was clearly real china and real silverware from the other room. And here, in the corner, was my spot. A paper plate, like I was the hired help, or a child who couldn't be trusted with the good dishes. "There you go," Lisa said, all cheerful, as if she'd just given me the best seat in the house. "You'll be much more comfortable in here, out of the way of all the noise." She patted my shoulder. It was the first time she touched me, and it felt like a pat you'd give a dog. "I'll have someone bring you a plate in a bit." And with that, she turned on her heel, her silk dress rustling, and disappeared back through the swinging door, back toward the Real party. I was left alone in that giant, silent kitchen. The only sound was the hum of the Sub-Zero refrigerator. My pie sat on the steel counter a few feet away, looking ridiculous. I looked at the paper plate. I looked at the single folding chair. My feet hurt from standing all day, but I couldn't bring myself to sit down. That little knot of worry I'd had all morning wasn't a knot anymore. It was a cold, heavy stone in the pit of my stomach. I hadn't even seen my own son, and I was being hidden in the kitchen. On Christmas, it was the first time in my life I truly felt invisible, like I was an inconvenience, something to be managed and put out of the way. I just stood there, clutching the strap of my purse, my heart getting heavier by the second. I must have stood there for 5 full minutes before I finally told my legs to move. My knee gave a small crackle as I pulled out the wobbly metal chair. It was cold. I sat down, my purse in my lap, and just stared at the empty paper plate. It seemed to shine under the bright kitchen spotlights. From the other room, I heard a man let out a loud, booming laugh. It was so full of joy. Then I heard music, a low jazz carol I didn't recognize. It all felt like it was happening a million miles away. I tried to make excuses for them. I really did. I told myself, well, it is a work party. Lisa said so. Maybe I don't know any of these people. Maybe this is easier. I don't want to be in the way. But the words felt hollow. Even if it was a work party, I was still his mother. You don't put your mother in the kitchen with a paper plate. Not on Christmas. The swinging door opened, and I looked up, my heart giving a hopeful little jump. But it wasn't Dennis. It was a young woman in a black and white uniform, like a caterer. She wasn't smiling. Mrs. Haynes, she asked. Yes, that's me, I said, trying to sound cheerful. She was holding a plate. A real china plate. But she walked over to me, slid the food off the real plate onto my paper one, and took the china plate back with her. I just watched her do it. A scoop of mashed potatoes, 2 slices of turkey, and a jiggle of cranberry sauce. It all just landed in a pile. Will there be anything else? She asked, her voice flat. No, thank you. This looks lovely. I lied. She nodded once and left, the door swinging shut, leaving me alone again. I picked up the plastic fork. It was flimsy and bent a little as I tried to cut a piece of the turkey. The food was lukewarm. I took a bite. It was just food. I chewed and swallowed, but I couldn't taste a thing. Every time I heard that burst of laughter from the dining room, it felt like a poke in the ribs. I felt like a child, like I was being punished, sitting in the corner while the grown-ups had fun. Another 15 minutes must have passed. I'd pushed the food around my plate, but I hadn't taken more than 3 bites. The door swung open again. This time, it was him. Dennis, I said, and my voice was so full of relief, it almost cracked. I started to stand up. He was in a dark suit that fit him perfectly. He looked so handsome, so grown up, but he was holding his phone, his thumb just flying across the screen. Hey, Mom. Merry Christmas, he said, but he didn't look at me. He walked over, gave me a quick, one-armed pat on the back, and his eyes went right back to his phone. Tap, tap, tap. Oh, Dennis, it's so wonderful to see you, I said, my smile genuine for the first time all night. Your house is just beautiful. The party sounds. Yeah, it's a madhouse out there, he said, still scrolling. Listen, I can only stay for a second. I've got to get back to my boss. Then he finally looked up. He looked past me at the kitchen, and then his eyes landed on the table. He saw the folding chair. He saw my paper plate with the cold food. I saw a flicker in his eyes. Just for a second. He knew. He knew this was wrong. What's this? He asked, gesturing to my plate. My heart was in my throat. This was it. He was going to fix it. He was going to say, Mom, what are you doing in here? Come on, I'll find you a seat. Lisa said. She said the dining room was too crowded. I said, my voice quiet. I watched his face. The flicker of confusion was gone as fast as it came. It was replaced by something else. Annoyance. He looked annoyed. He let out a sigh and shrugged. A full, what can you do? Shrug. Well, I'm sure the main table's crowded, he said, not meeting my eyes. It's just crazy tonight. Lisa's probably just stressed out. I'm sure it's fine. The food's the same, right? My smile dissolved. My stomach dropped. He saw it. He saw his own mother, on Christmas, eating off a paper plate in the kitchen, and he shrugged. I brought your pie, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Oh, great, Mom. Sounds great. We'll have some later. Tap, tap, tap. Listen, I really gotta run. Glad you could make it. He gave me another quick pat and was gone. He was in the kitchen for less than a minute. He saw it all and he walked away. That was the real betrayal. That's what really broke me. I sat back down in that wobbly chair and the tears finally came. I just put my head in my hands. The food was cold. I was cold. I felt worthless. A few minutes later, the door opened again. I wiped my eyes, expecting the caterer, but it was Lisa. She was holding a tall glass of bubbling champagne, and she leaned against the doorframe, a little smirk on her face. Everything okay in here, Maxine? She asked. Her voice was pure sugar. I was done pretending. I was too tired and too hurt. Why am I in here, Lisa? I asked, just looking at her. The smirk widened. She took a delicate sip of her champagne. You know, Maxine, she said, I just thought it would be better if you ate in here tonight. She pushed off the doorframe and walked toward the center of the kitchen, looking around like she was a queen surveying her castle. The guests out there, they're very important people, Maxine. They're enjoying themselves. She stopped and turned to look right at me, her eyes cold. I'm sure you wouldn't want to, ruin the atmosphere. Ruin the atmosphere. Those 3 words just hung in the air, sucking all the oxygen out of the room. I wasn't just in the way. I was a problem. I was something that could ruin things, as if I were a bad smell or a stray dog that had wandered in. Ruin the atmosphere. I repeated, my voice shaking. I'm your husband's mother. And I'm his wife. Lisa snapped, all the fake sugar gone. Her voice was like ice. This is my home. This is a very important night for Dennis's career. I told you it was a work thing, not a little family get-together. She glanced at my plate with disgust. Besides, you seem fine. You've got your food. It's not like you're starving. I felt the tears streaming down my face now, hot and angry. I wasn't just sad anymore. I was humiliated. She was doing this on purpose. This wasn't an oversight. This was a message. She looked at the fancy watch on her wrist. Well, I need to get back to my real guests. Enjoy your dinner. She turned and walked out, her heels clicking on the marble. The door swung shut, leaving me in the silence. But it wasn't silent. I could hear her words ringing in my ears. Ruin the atmosphere. My son had seen it and done nothing. My daughter-in-law had planned it. I looked at the congealed food on my paper plate. I wasn't invisible anymore. I was garbage. And I'd never felt so alone in my entire life. I sat there, completely still. The swinging door was quiet. The only sound in the whole kitchen was that high-tech refrigerator humming. It was so loud in the silence. Lisa's words just echoed in that big, empty room. Ruin the atmosphere. My real guests. The tears had stopped. I wasn't crying anymore. I just felt cold, like all the warmth had been vacuumed out of me. I looked down at the paper plate in front of me. The turkey was gray. The mashed potatoes had a sort of skin on them. It looked like scraps. It looked like something you'd scrape into the bin. I put my plastic fork down and slowly, deliberately pushed the plate away from me, just a few inches. I couldn't stand to look at it anymore. My eyes drifted from the plate, past the fancy coffee maker, to the wide stretch of stainless steel counter near the pantry. And there it was, my pie. It was still in the cardboard box. I'd carried it in. I'd spent so much time on it. I'd woken up early yesterday to make the dough from scratch, letting it chill for exactly 2 hours, just like my mother taught me. I'd peeled every one of those Granny Smith apples by hand. I'd carefully woven the lattice crust, brushing it with egg wash and sprinkling it with cinnamon sugar, so it would be perfectly golden and crisp. I'd even crimped the edges with a fork, the way Dennis used to love. He'd help me do it when he was little, leaving his tiny thumbprints all over the crust. That's when the memory hit me. So hard it was like a punch to the chest. Dennis was 8. He'd been trying to ride his new bicycle without training wheels and had taken a nasty fall on the sidewalk. He came running into the kitchen, his face red and streaked with tears, his knee a bloody mess of gravel and dirt. He was wailing, convinced he was dying. I'd scooped him right up, sat him on the counter, and told him to take a deep breath. My hands were covered in flour, but I didn't care. I got the washcloth, cleaned his knee, and put on the bright blue superhero bandage he liked. He was still sniffling, his little body trembling. It still hurts, he'd whimpered. I know, baby, I'd said, but I have just the thing. I'd just taken a pie out of the oven. This pie, his favorite. I cut him a big slice, not even waiting for it to cool all the way, and put it on a plate with a scoop of vanilla ice cream. He took one bite, and the tears just stopped. Like magic, his eyes got big. "You make the best pie in the whole world, Mommy," he'd said, his mouth full. He'd leaned over and given me a big, sticky hug that left a streak of apple filling on my shirt. "I love you." I squeezed my eyes shut. Where was that little boy? Where was the man who would even remember that? The man who had just stood in this very kitchen, looked at my paper plate, and shrugged. That wasn't my son. That was a stranger in a fancy suit. A stranger who was more worried about his boss than his own mother. I looked at the pie on the counter. It wasn't a gift of love anymore. It was a joke. It was a big, stupid, cinnamon-covered symbol of how foolish I'd been. All that hope I'd had in the car, all that excitement, it was just me lying to myself. I'd spent hours baking that pie for a man who didn't exist, and I'd brought it to a house where I wasn't even welcome. A house where I was seen as trash. Something that could ruin the atmosphere. The sadness I'd felt just evaporated. It burned off, and underneath it was something hard and cold. It was anger. It was a deep, quiet anger I hadn't felt in years. Lisa didn't see me as family. She saw me as a problem. And Dennis saw me as an obligation he couldn't be bothered with. He saw me, and he chose his new, shiny life. He chose her. I'd been sitting there, feeling sorry for myself. I'd been crying. Over what? Over them. They weren't worth my tears. I needed to get out. I couldn't stay in this kitchen, in this house, for one more second. I felt a sudden, desperate need to hear a friendly voice, to connect with someone who actually saw me, Maxine Haynes, as a person, not as an embarrassment. I fumbled in my purse for my phone. My hands were shaking, but not from sadness anymore. They were shaking with rage. I stood up from that cold, metal chair. I wasn't going to sit here and be humiliated. I had to get some air. I had to get away from the smell of their rich food and the sound of their fake laughter. I pushed open the swinging door, just a crack, making sure no one was in the hall. It was empty. I slipped out and hurried down the hallway toward the back of the house, looking for a porch, a patio, anything. I just needed to be outside. I needed to breathe. I found a glass door at the end of the hall and pushed it open. It led to a large, screened-in porch. It was dark, and the air was cool and damp. I was grateful for it. It was a relief after the stuffy, silent kitchen. I walked to the farthest, darkest corner, where no one from the party could look out and see me, and I leaned against the wall. My hands were shaking. That deep, cold anger was still there, but underneath it was just this awful, hollow feeling. The feeling of being completely and utterly alone. I'd driven here so full of hope, and now I was hiding on a dark porch, like a child. I felt so stupid. I felt like I'd done something wrong, even though I knew deep down I hadn't. I pulled my phone out of my purse. The screen lit up, blinding me for a second. I fumbled with the screen, my fingers stiff. I had to call someone. I couldn't just take this. I couldn't just sit here and swallow this humiliation. My finger hovered over my daughter's name. Sarah. Sarah lives in Chicago with her husband and my 2 grandchildren. She's my girl, but she's not like Dennis. She's fiery. She says what she thinks, and she doesn't put up with nonsense from anyone. We bicker sometimes the way mothers and daughters do, but if I've ever really needed her, she's been there. I hesitated. It was Christmas night. She was with her family. I could picture it, the kids running around, the smell of her cooking. The last thing I wanted to do was call her and cry. I didn't want to be a burden. I didn't want, what was it Lisa said? Ruin the atmosphere. My God, was that what I was? Just a burden? Someone who ruined things? I looked back through the glass door into the bright, perfect house. I could hear a fresh burst of laughter from the dining room. No, I wasn't going to believe that. I wasn't a burden. I was a person. I was their mother. I took a shaky breath and pressed the call button next to Sarah's name. My thumb was trembling. It rang once, twice. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would come through my chest. Mom. Her voice was bright and cheerful, full of holiday noise. Merry Christmas. We were just about to sit down. The kids are. The sound of her voice, so normal and so happy, it broke me. I thought I was done crying. I was wrong. I opened my mouth to say Merry Christmas, but all that came out was this choked, gasping sound. A sob I'd been holding back ever since I saw that paper plate. Mom. Her voice changed in a second. The party noise in the background faded, like she'd stepped into another room. Mom, what's wrong? What happened? Are you okay? Are you hurt? I'm at Dennis's. I whispered. I was trying so hard to be quiet, so no one inside could hear me. At Dennis's? What's wrong? Is he okay? Is Lisa? Did something happen? No, I choked out. He's fine. They're having a party. And then, standing there in the dark, it all just spilled out. I couldn't have stopped it if I tried. It was like a dam breaking. Sarah, she put me in the kitchen. There was a dead silence on the line. What? Sarah said. What do you mean, put you in the kitchen? She said the dining room was too crowded. She said it was a work party. She set up a folding table for me. I was crying so hard now, I could barely get the words out. A metal card table. Sarah. In the corner. By the pantry. A folding table. Her voice was flat. And a paper plate. The words felt like poison in my mouth. She gave me a paper plate and plastic, while they're all in the other room. I can hear them. They have real dishes. They're all laughing. Mom. And the worst part, I just kept going. The worst part, Dennis. He came in. He saw me. He saw the table. He saw the plate. He saw it, Sarah. What did he do? She asked. Her voice was low. He shrugged. I whispered. He shrugged. He said he was sure it was just crowded, and Lisa was stressed. He was on his phone. He patted my back, and he left. He left me there. For a second, there was only breathing on the phone. Then I heard her speak, and the cheerfulness was completely gone. Her voice was cold and hard, a voice I hadn't heard in a long time. He what? He shrugged, she said, her voice getting louder. He shrugged. His mother, at a card table, with a paper plate, and I'm going to call him. I'm going to call him right now. No, Sarah, please don't. I said, panicked. You'll just make it worse. He's with his boss. I don't care who he's with. That is. And then Lisa came in. I hurried on because I had to tell someone. She came in with a glass of champagne, and she told me I would ruin the atmosphere. She said her real guests were in the dining room. I heard her take a sharp breath. That horrible woman. I knew it. I told you I never liked her, Mom. I told you. A paper plate. That's not an accident. That's not stressed. That is on purpose. That is cruel. I know, I whispered. I was leaning my head against the cool wall. I feel so stupid. I baked him a pie. His favorite apple pie. It's just sitting on the counter. They haven't even looked at it. I'm just trash to them. No. Her voice was sharp like a slap. No. You listen to me, Mom. Are you listening? Yes, I sniffled. You are not trash. You are my mother. You are Maxine Haynes. You are the kindest, most generous person I have ever known. They are trash. Dennis and his social climbing ice queen wife. They are hollow. They are garbage. You are not. I closed my eyes, and her words were like a lifeline. I held on to them. You're right, I said, my voice still shaky. You're damn right I'm right, she said. Mom, you do not have to stay there. You hear me? You are a guest. You are supposed to be an honored guest. You get your purse, and you walk out that front door. I don't know where to go. It's Christmas night. I don't care. Go to a hotel. Drive home. Go to your friend Betty's house. But you get out of that house. You do not give them the satisfaction of sitting there and taking it. That's not a family, Mom. You told me yourself. Lisa called it a work thing. Well, you don't work for them. You are not their servant, and you are not an embarrassment. I took a deep breath. The shaking in my hands was starting to stop. The cold anger was coming back, but this time it felt clean. It felt strong. Sarah was right. You're right, I said again, and this time my voice was firm. I'm not sitting in that kitchen. I'm not. Good. You don't deserve this. He should be ashamed of himself. Both of them. He should be, I said, and I was suddenly deeply angry. He saw me. He saw me. You call me the second you are in your car and safe. You hear me? The second. I love you, Mom. You are better than all of them. Don't you forget that. I love you too, Sarah. Thank you, honey. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas, Mom. Now go. Get out of there. I pressed the end call button and stood there in the dark for another moment. My hand was steady now. Sarah's words echoed in my ears. You are not trash. He should be ashamed. She was right. This wasn't an oversight. This wasn't a mistake. This was a choice. Lisa chose to humiliate me. And Dennis, my son, he chose to let her. He chose his boss and his fancy party over his own mother. He saw my paper plate, and he shrugged. I wasn't going to just slink out the back door like a stray dog. I wasn't going to just disappear. I came in through the front door, and I would leave through the front door. But first, I was going to find my son. He wasn't going to get away with a shrug. Not this time. I put my phone back in my purse and snapped it shut. I pulled my shoulders back and stood up straight. I wasn't the crying woman in the kitchen anymore. I wasn't an inconvenience. I was his mother, and he was going to look me in the eye. I pushed open the glass door and walked back into the house, my heels clicking on the floor. I wasn't hiding anymore. I pushed the door open from the porch and walked back into the hallway. My heels clicked loudly on the marble floor. I didn't care who heard me. The house was hot and stuffy, and the smell of roasted meat and perfume was suffocating. I felt like I was moving through thick mud, but that cold, hard anger from Sarah's call kept me going. I wasn't crying. I was finished with tears. I walked toward the sound of the party. The dining room was just off the main hall through a wide, arched doorway. I stopped in the shadow of the arch, just out of sight, and I saw it. It was everything the kitchen wasn't. A long, dark wood table polished to a mirror shine. It was set for at least 20 people. There were tall, flickering candles, crystal glasses for water and wine, shining under the light of a huge chandelier. Real, heavy silverware. And in the center, a floral arrangement that was bigger than my entire television. I saw them all. Men in dark suits, women in sparkling dresses, holding their wine glasses, laughing. And there, at the head of the table, was Dennis. He was holding his own glass up, telling a story. His face was lit up, full of energy and charm. He was making everyone laugh. A man next to him, an older, important-looking man, clapped him on the shoulder. This was the man who, not 20 minutes ago, had looked at his own mother sitting on a folding chair and shrugged. He was a wonderful actor. I saw Lisa at the other end of the table, smiling like a queen. She looked proud. They were a perfect couple in their perfect house with their perfect important guests. And I was the secret. I was the flaw. I was the thing that could ruin the atmosphere. I stood there, invisible in the hallway, and just watched him. I watched him charm these strangers. I watched him refill their glasses. I watched him be the man I'd raised him to be, polite, attentive, engaging. But it was all for them, for his boss, for his new life. There was nothing left for me. I wasn't going to make a scene. I wasn't going to walk in there and give Lisa the satisfaction of calling me crazy or dramatic. I would wait. I stood in that hallway for at least 10 minutes. It felt like an hour. My feet were throbbing. Finally, I saw him push his chair back. He said something to the man beside him and started walking toward the hallway, right toward me. He was probably going to the kitchen, maybe to get more wine or check on dessert. His head was down, and he was smiling to himself, probably replaying his own clever joke. I stepped out from the shadows, right into his path. Dennis! My voice wasn't loud, but in that hallway, it sounded like a gunshot. He physically jumped, his hand flying to his chest. Mom! God, you scared me. What are you doing lurking in the dark? His voice was sharp with annoyance, not concern. I told you, I'm busy. I can't talk. He tried to step around me, back, toward the kitchen. I didn't move. We need to talk, I said. My voice was low and steady. It didn't shake at all. Mom, not now. I have guests. I know. I saw them. You're real guests. He winced. He knew that phrase. What are you? Who? We're going to talk, I said. Outside. Now. He looked past me toward the dining room, terrified one of his guests would see us. That's all he cared about, the image of the thing. Fine, he hissed, his face red with anger. Fine, but make it quick. He didn't lead me to the front door. He led me back down the hall, back to the dark porch I'd just left. He pushed the glass door open and stalked out onto the damp grass of the backyard, far away from the party lights. He didn't want to be overheard. He stopped in the middle of the lawn and crossed his arms, tapping his foot. He was treating me like an employee who'd messed up an order. What? He snapped. What is so important that you had to pull me out of my own dinner party? I just got off the phone with Sarah, I said. His whole body tensed. You called Sarah? On Christmas? Why? To what? Complain about me? To tattle on Lisa? I called my daughter, I said, my voice as cold as the night air, because I was sitting alone in your kitchen, in the corner, eating lukewarm food off a paper plate, because I was humiliated and hurt, and my son did nothing. Oh, my God, Mom, he said, throwing his hands up in the air. Are we back to the plate? I told you, it's a crowded party. You're making a big deal out of nothing. Nothing. I took a step toward him. You call that nothing? Do you have any idea? No, you don't. Let me be very clear. He tried to interrupt, but I held up my hand. No, you are going to listen to me. Not as your boss's employee. Not as Lisa's husband. You're going to listen to me as my son. He shut his mouth, but his jaw was tight. I drove here today, I said, my voice shaking just a little, so excited I could barely stand it. I baked your favorite pie. I wore my best blouse. I came here to see you, Dennis, to be with my family on Christmas. And when I arrived, your wife looked at me like I was something she'd scraped off her shoe. She lied to me about being tight on space in a house this big. She walked me past your beautiful dining room and sat me in the kitchen at a folding table, Dennis, a cold metal card table. He was shuffling his feet, looking at the ground. He couldn't look at me. She gave me a paper plate and a plastic fork, while you and your important guests are eating off china. And you know what? I sat there. I took it. I made excuses for her. I told myself it was fine. But then you came in. I pointed a finger at his chest. You walked in. You saw me. I saw it in your eyes, Dennis. You saw your 68-year-old mother, all alone in the corner. You saw the paper plate. You saw the whole, ugly, humiliating picture. And what did you do? He just stood there, his arms crossed, staring at the ground. You shrugged. I whispered. The word was full of venom. You shrugged. You said, I'm sure it's fine. And you walked away. You didn't even ask if I was okay. You just left me there. Mom, what did you want me to do? He finally burst out. Huh? What? Stop the whole party? Yell at Lisa in front of everyone? Make a huge scene? I wanted you to do something. I was yelling now. I wanted you to say, Mom, what is this? Come on, I'll get you a chair at the table. I wanted you to show me 1 ounce of the respect and charm you are pouring all over those strangers in there. I wanted you to act like my son. It's complicated, he said, his face twisting. No, it's not. It's simple. And then, to make it all worse, your wife came in. She came in and told me, right to my face, that I was being hidden away because I would ruin the atmosphere, that I wasn't a real guest, that I was an embarrassment. His head snapped up. His face went pale. She didn't say that. Oh, she said it. She said it all. She wanted to make sure I knew my place. And you're the one who put me there. For a moment, just a second, the mask cracked. The angry, important man was gone, and I saw a flicker of that little boy. He looked guilty. He looked ashamed. Mom, look. He ran his hand through his perfectly styled hair. Lisa, she gets crazy with these parties. She's been planning this for months. She's intense. Okay? I know. And I saw the table, and I didn't know what to do. He was stumbling over his words, desperate for an excuse. I didn't want to start a fight, he said, his voice dropping to a plead. Not tonight. Not in front of my boss. I was just trying to keep the peace. That's all. I was just trying to keep the peace. I just stared at him. The last bit of warmth I had for him died, right there, on that wet grass. Keep the peace, I repeated. It wasn't a question. Yes. Can't you just let it go? For one night. It's Christmas. Why do you have to come here and make this a whole big thing? Why can't you just be easy? That was it. That was the moment it all became clear. He saw me. He knew it was wrong. And he made a choice. He wasn't keeping the peace. He was sacrificing me to keep his peace. He was protecting his wife from the consequences of her own cruelty. He was protecting his boss from the inconvenience of his mother. He had weighed his life, his job, and his wife against me, and I'd lost. I wasn't just low on the list. I wasn't on the list at all. He wasn't the victim of his wife. He was her partner. He was just as cruel as she was. He was just a coward about it. I looked at this man, this stranger in a suit. The son I'd raised, the little boy who loved my pie. He was gone. I didn't know the person standing in front of me, and I knew I was done. I was done with him. I was done with this house. You're right, I said. My voice was calm. It was frighteningly calm. He looked relieved. Thank you, Mom. See, it's fine. We can. You're right, I said again, cutting him off. It's not complicated at all. You've made it very, very simple. I turned my back on him. I didn't say another word. I just started walking, my heels sinking a little into the soft grass as I headed back toward the house. Mom, he called after me. his voice suddenly confused. Mom, where are you going? Are you leaving? I didn't answer. I just kept walking. I wasn't going to the porch. I was going to the kitchen. I had one last thing to do. I walked straight through the glass door, letting it swing shut behind me. I didn't care about being quiet. Mom? Wait. What are you talking about? Mom. Dennis was right behind me, his voice a panicked, high-pitched hiss. He was still worried about his guests hearing him. He grabbed my elbow. Mom, stop. What are you doing? I yanked my arm away and kept walking. I marched right back into that bright, terrible kitchen. It was all still there. The wobbly metal chair, pulled out at that sad, crooked angle. My paper plate, with the gray, half-eaten food, was still sitting there, a tombstone for my hope. The swinging door from the dining room burst open, and it was Lisa. Her face was flushed, and that perfect, polite mask was gone. She'd clearly seen Dennis bolt from the table. What is going on out here? She demanded. Her voice was sharp, and her eyes shot to me. Dennis, what's she doing? They both stood there, near the giant steel island, looking at me. They looked like partners, like two people who had been caught. Mom, you are being dramatic, Dennis said. He was trying to get control, to push this all back down. Just calm down. Let's go back outside and talk. You can't just leave, Maxine. Lisa chimed in, stepping forward. Her voice was like ice. Our guests are going to wonder where you went. You are going to make a scene. I just looked at her. Ruin the atmosphere. I asked. My voice was quiet, but it cut right through the hum of the refrigerator. Lisa's face tightened. She knew I had her. I will not have you embarrassing Dennis. She snapped. This is a work party. I told you. You clearly don't understand these things. This is high level. This is you. She stopped, but her eyes finished the sentence. You're not good enough. You don't belong here. Mom, Dennis begged. He physically stepped in front of me, blocking my path to the hallway. He put his hands up like he was trying to calm a spooked horse. Mom, please. Just go back to the kitchen. Sit down. Please. I'll bring you a real plate. I'll bring you a glass of wine. We can talk about this tomorrow. Tomorrow. I looked at my son, this tall stranger, his face full of panic, begging me to go back to my corner, to my paper plate. You think you can just put me back in the box? I asked, my voice dangerously low. Go back to the kitchen? You think that's going to fix this? It's better than this, he pleaded, his eyes darting to the swinging door, terrified one of his important guests would see. You're ruining everything. I'm ruining. I almost laughed. It was a cold, bitter sound. Dennis, I'm not ruining anything. You and Lisa, you've already ruined it all. That's when I stopped. My purse felt heavy on my shoulder. I looked at Dennis, at his desperate, pleading face. I looked at Lisa, her face a beautiful mask of pure, cold fury. And then my eyes went back to the folding table. You're right, I said, my voice suddenly calm. You invited me for dinner. I was a guest. I ate. Well, I sat. I should pay. Dennis just looked confused. What? Mom, that's crazy. Stop talking crazy. You're not making any sense. Lisa's eyes narrowed. She knew what I was doing. She saw it before he did. Maxine, she hissed, don't you dare. I just held her gaze. I slid my heavy purse off my shoulder and set it on the cold steel counter. I didn't hurry. I took my time. I unzipped the main compartment. My hands were perfectly steady. I reached inside and pulled out my wallet, the old cracked brown leather one that Frank had given me more than 20 years ago. I unzipped the change part, then shook my head. No. I opened the billfold. I saw a 50, a 10, and a few ones. And I saw the crisp $20 bill I'd gotten from the bank a few days ago, tucked in the back for emergencies. This was an emergency. Mom, what are you doing with that? Dennis said, his voice high and thin. Put your money away. You're scaring me. What's wrong with you? What's wrong with me? I pulled the $20 bill out and held it between my thumb and forefinger. I looked right into his eyes. You should be scared of yourself, Dennis, of what you've allowed, of what you've become. I zipped my wallet. I put it back in my purse. I zipped the purse. Then, holding just that single $20 bill, I walked right past them. They were so shocked, they just parted and let me pass. I walked over to that awful, wobbly card table in the corner. I looked at the cold, congealed food on the paper plate, and I laid the $20 bill right on top of the gray turkey. This should cover my meal, I said. My voice was clear. It didn't waver. The silence in that kitchen was absolute. It was so quiet I could hear the ice maker drop a new cube into its bin. Lisa just stared. Her jaw was slack. Her mouth was open. The blood drained from her face. And then in a flash, it came rushing back. I had never, ever seen a look of such pure, white-hot hatred. You, she hissed. You old witch. Her voice was a low, venomous whisper. Get out. Lisa. Dennis yelled, but he wasn't looking at her. He was looking at the $20. He looked like he was going to be sick. He couldn't look at me. He just stared at the money on the plate, as if it were a snake. Get out of my house. Lisa shrieked, her voice cracking, all her high-level polish gone. With pleasure, I said. I turned my back on them. I walked back to the counter, picked up my coat, and didn't even bother to put it on. I just slung it over my arm. I walked out of the kitchen, pushed the swinging door open, and walked into the hall. Mom. Wait. Mom. Dennis was scrambling after me, his voice a desperate, broken whisper. He was terrified of the guests hearing, but more terrified of me leaving. Mom, please, don't. Just don't. I didn't turn around. I could hear that the party had gone quiet. Lisa's shriek must have carried. As I passed the archway to the dining room, I could feel every eye on me. I didn't look at them. I kept my head high and stared straight at the front door. Dennis grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my coat. Mom, please. You're making a mistake. You're ruining Christmas. I stopped. I was just 3 feet from the door. I slowly turned my head and looked down at his hand on my arm. Then I looked up into his face. He was crying. Real tears were streaming down his cheeks, this successful, important man. No, Dennis, I said, and my voice was so tired, so empty. You and Lisa already did that. I pulled my arm out of his grip. It was easy. He had no strength. I walked the last few steps, put my hand on the cold brass knob, and opened the door. I stepped out into the cool night air. The neighbors' Christmas lights were blinking red and green, red and green. I closed the door behind me. I heard the lock click. I walked to my car. My legs felt like they were made of jelly, but they held me up. I fumbled with my keys, my hands finally starting to shake. I got in, locked the doors, and just sat there in the driver's seat. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. My whole body was trembling, like I just survived an accident. I looked at the house. The front door was still closed. He wasn't coming after me. He'd made his final choice. He'd stayed inside with her. I put the key in the ignition and started the car. The engine rumbled to life, and a cheerful Christmas carol immediately filled the car. I slapped the radio off. The silence was better. I put the car in reverse, backed out of that perfect curved driveway, and put the car in drive. I pulled away from the curb and didn't look back in the rearview mirror. I drove for a few miles, just numb. But the further I got from that house, the more the shaking stopped. The hollow, sick feeling in my stomach was still there. But so was something else. Clarity. I thought of Frank, my husband. He would have been so angry. But more than that, he would have been so disappointed. In Dennis. In the boy he'd raised to be a good, strong man. A new wave of grief hit me, but it wasn't for me. It was for my son. He had lost. He had traded his mother, his past, his family, for what? A fancy house. A pat on the back from his boss. For Lisa, he'd made his choice. Leaving that $20 bill. Maybe it was petty. Maybe it was spiteful. I don't know. And in that moment, I truly did not care. It was the only way I could take my power back. It was the only language they seemed to understand. Money. Transactions. I wasn't their embarrassing mother. I wasn't an inconvenience. I was a customer who had paid for her terrible meal and was now leaving. It was a painful, heartbreaking decision, but it was mine. I wasn't their victim anymore. I was just done. And I knew, as I drove down the dark, empty highway on Christmas night, that my life had just changed. I had finally, after 68 years, chosen myself. I didn't really drive home. I functioned. I was on autopilot. My hands knew how to hold the wheel. My foot knew how to press the gas and the brake. But my mind was a million miles away. It was Christmas night, so the roads were almost completely empty. It was like driving through a ghost town. Every house I passed was lit up, warm and golden, full of families. I could see Christmas trees in their front windows. And here I was 68 years old, driving home alone in the dark, my coat still bunched up on the passenger seat, my signature apple pie left behind on a steel counter. The anger that had propelled me out of the house had burned off like a flash fire. All that was left was this huge, hollow, aching cold. I felt exhausted. I felt 100 years old. When I finally pulled into my own driveway, I just sat in the car for a good 5 minutes. My little house looked so dark. I'd left the porch light on. Thank goodness. But it just looked lonely. I finally got out, my knees cracking as I stood. I fumbled with my house key, and the lock was stubborn. When I finally got the door open, I stepped inside. The house was quiet. It smelled like home, like cinnamon and old books and my husband Frank's armchair. It was the complete opposite of that cold marble and glass box I just left. On my kitchen counter, the flour canister and the rolling pin were still out from when I baked the pie yesterday. I looked at them, and a fresh wave of, not sadness, but emptiness just washed over me. All that effort, all that love, wasted. I didn't bother turning on the main lights. I just walked into the living room, dropped my purse and my coat on the floor, and collapsed onto the sofa. I pulled my mother's old Afghan over my legs. I just sat in the dark. Then I remembered. My phone. Sarah. I'd promised to call her. My hands were shaking again as I dug the phone out of my purse. I hit her number on the screen. She picked up before the first ring even finished. Mom, are you out? Are you in the car? Are you safe? I'm home, honey, I whispered. My voice sounded scratchy. I'm on my sofa. Oh, thank God. I heard her let out a huge breath. Mom, what happened? Did you just leave? Did they say anything? I closed my eyes, leaning my head back against the cushions. They said a lot. I said, and just like before, it all spilled out again. But this time, it wasn't a panicked, tearful sob. It was a cold, tired report. I told her about the confrontation in the backyard. I told her how Dennis had accused me of making a scene, of ruining Christmas. I told her how he'd begged me not to come to the table, but to go back to my corner. And then I told her about the end. I went back to the kitchen. I said, my voice faltering for the first time. And they were both there. Lisa, she was furious. And Dennis, he just kept telling me I was being dramatic. He just wanted me to be quiet and go away. That coward, Sarah hissed. I could hear the anger in her voice, clear as a bell. So, I did something, Sarah. I don't know. I don't know if it was right. I think maybe it was petty. What, Mom? What did you do? I took out my wallet. I whispered. I took out a $20 bill. And I put it on the paper plate, on top of the food. I told them. I said, this should cover my meal. There was a dead silence on the phone. For a second, I thought she was angry at me. I thought she was going to agree that I'd stoop to their level. Then I heard her. It was a single, sharp sound, a bark of a laugh. But it wasn't a happy sound. It was a laugh of disbelief. You didn't, she said. I did. I whispered, ashamed. It was awful of me. Awful. Her voice suddenly became fierce. Mom, that wasn't awful. That was brilliant. That was perfect. Oh my God. Mom, good for you. Good for you. You really think so? I know so. What else were you supposed to do? They wouldn't listen to your words. They wouldn't listen to your hurt. You had to speak to them in the only language they understand. Money, image, transactions. You didn't just walk out with your tail between your legs. You showed them exactly what they had done. You turned their own ugly behavior right back on them. I'm proud of you, Mom. I hadn't realized I was crying again. Silent tears just rolling down my cheeks and soaking the collar of my blouse. But these weren't sad tears. They were, I don't know, relief. He didn't come after me. Sarah, I choked out. I walked out the front door, and he let me go. He stayed inside, with her. The line was quiet for a moment. When Sarah spoke again, her voice was soft. All the anger was gone, replaced by a deep sadness that matched my own. Mom, she said, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I know this isn't just about a bad dinner. This is about Dennis. I lost him. I whispered into the dark. I've been losing him for years, haven't I? Ever since he met her. But tonight, I lost him. That boy I raised, he's gone. He let her do it. And then he chose her. He chose that. He did, Sarah said, and I loved her for not lying to me. She didn't say, oh, he'll come around. She didn't make excuses for him. She told me the truth. He did make that choice, Mom. And that is his failure. That is his shame. Not yours. You have nothing to be ashamed of. We talked for another hour. We talked about Frank and what he would have done. We talked about the grandkids, and she made me promise to come to Chicago for New Year's to get away. It was a long, sad, comforting call. When we finally hung up, I felt wrung out, like a wet dish rag that had been twisted until not a single drop was left. I didn't go to bed. I couldn't. I just curled up on the sofa and pulled the Afghan over my head. I didn't sleep. I watched the shadows in the living room change as the moon moved across the sky. I replayed every second. The paper plate, Dennis's shrug, Lisa's smirk, the $20 bill, the sound of the front door closing. I was grieving. I was grieving my son, the son who had died, not in an accident, but by 1,000 tiny, selfish choices. I must have fallen asleep at some point because I woke up with a start. My neck was stiff and my back ached. Sunlight was streaming in through the living room window. Bright, cheerful morning sunlight. It was the next day, the day after Christmas. I sat up, my body groaning in protest. The Afghan fell to my lap. I looked around my living room. My purse and coat were still on the floor. The house was cold. I sat there, waiting for the wave of devastation to hit me. I expected to just break, to collapse into sobs again. But it didn't come. I just sat there. And the only thing I felt was quiet. It was peace. A strange, heavy, sad kind of peace. I stood up, walked into the kitchen, and put the kettle on for a cup of tea. The knot of anxiety that had lived in my stomach for the last 5 years, the knot of, I hope Lisa's in a good mood, the knot of I wonder if Dennis will call, it was gone. I wasn't hoping anymore. And it was a relief. I'd spent years trying to win their approval, trying to be the perfect, easy, out-of-the-way mother-in-law. I'd walked on eggshells. I'd bit my tongue. I'd made excuses for them. I'd accepted their scraps of affection like a hungry dog. And for what? For a paper plate in the kitchen. Standing there, waiting for the kettle to whistle, the realization hit me. I didn't have to do that anymore. I was done. I didn't know if Dennis would ever call me to apologize. I honestly didn't think he would. He'd have to admit he was wrong. And I think he was too deep in that life to do that. Maybe he'd call in a few months and pretend nothing had happened. But I knew one thing, as surely as I knew my own name. I was not going to be the one to call. I was not going to be the one to apologize or to smooth things over. My life was no longer going to be about waiting for my son to be my son again. I was going to have to make a new life for myself. A life built around people who actually saw me. Around Sarah and my grandkids. Around my friends like Betty. Just around me. It was terrifying. The thought of my son being gone from my life, it was a physical ache in my chest. But it was also freeing. I was no longer going to tolerate being mistreated just for the sake of calling it family. My family was Sarah. My family was the people who loved me, not the people who hid me. The kettle whistled. I poured the hot water into my mug. I looked out the window at my own little backyard. It was the day after Christmas. And for the first time in a very long time, I didn't know what was going to happen next. But I knew whoever I was going to be that person with my head held high. I was done with folding tables. I was done with paper plates. It's been a little while since that Christmas. I did go to Chicago for New Year's. I saw my grandkids, and Sarah and I just talked for hours. It was what I needed. It was like breathing clean air after being in a house full of smoke. I haven't heard from Dennis. Not a text, not a call, not an I'm sorry card. Nothing. And, as much as that hurts, it tells me everything. It confirms that I did the right thing. He's made his choice, and I've had to make mine. Telling this story hasn't been easy. You spend your whole life raising a child. You pour everything you have into them. You forgive them. You support them. You love them. And you never, ever imagine that one day that same child will look at you, see you in pain, and just shrug. But I've learned something hard. Love. Love should never be a one-way street. Not even with your own children. You can love them with your whole heart, but you are not required to let them break yours. You are not required to set yourself on fire just to keep them warm. Family is the most important thing in the world. I still believe that. But family isn't just a word. It's not just about blood. It's about respect. It's about kindness. It's about showing up for each other. It's about making sure the people you love feel loved, not making them feel like an embarrassment or a problem you have to hide in the kitchen. I'm telling you all this because I know I'm not the only one. I know there are so many of you out there sitting at your own folding tables being handed a paper plate by the people who are supposed to cherish you. You're biting your tongue, you're making excuses, and you're doing it all in the name of keeping the peace. But here's the question I had to ask myself. Whose piece are you keeping? Theirs or yours? I'd like to ask you all to share your stories in the comments. I'll be reading them. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself in your own family, especially when it was the hardest thing to do? What was that moment for you? What was the hardest part? And I have to ask you, and I want you to be honest, what did you think of what I did? That $20 bill I left on the plate, was I right? Was that a moment of strength? Or did I just stoop to their level? I've gone over it in my head 1,000 times, and I still don't know if it was the right or wrong thing to do. I just know it was what I had to do. Please, tell me what you would have done. I still don't know what my future holds, or if I'll ever have a real relationship with my son again. But I know this. I will never, ever again be made to feel like I am not worth a real seat at the table. And neither should you.